You're listening to the Transforming Society podcast. I'm Richard Kemp, and on today's episode, I'm joined by Rodney D. Coates, Professor of Critical Race and Ethnic Studies at Miami University. Rodney's new book, Critical Race Theory and the Search for Truth, published by Bristol University Press, is a historical deep dive into the origins of critical race theory, showing the ways that it has been problematized, demonized, and its potential for societal change. In his book, Rodney takes us on a journey through multiple examples of sweeping systemic racism, from the transatlantic slave trade to Haiti, and bringing us right up to the modern day. Through his considered analysis, Rodney shows that the roots of racism are long, delivered through imperialism and capitalism, and tangled with so many other social injustices. He offers critiques for both left and right sides of the political debate, debunking a wealth of misinformation and showing how such rhetoric can be harmful and even fatal. Rodney D. Coates, welcome to the Transforming Society podcast.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much for coming on today. I really loved reading your book. I'm excited to dig into it. One of the I've noticed on the reviewers page, one of the reviewers of your book called Critical Race Theory an important intellectual tool, and they said that critical race theory's success has placed it in the crosshairs of white nationalists and their political operatives. What is critical race theory, and why has it ended up in the crosshairs of white nationalists?
Critical race theory is an attempt to understand how race has become embedded within our society, particularly the United States and the Western world. In so doing, it recognizes that we have normalized race in most of our institutions to the extent that we ignore the fact that it's actually there. It's much like the paper cut. Many times you don't realize that you cut yourself with the paper until you look down and you see the cut. Well, it's similarly with our structure of race. We tend to ignore it. We tend to assume it is normal, and we tend to become blasé about it, almost to the point of being dismissive. Having said that, it recognizes that how we look at the world in many cases reflects our own positionality. As a consequence, if we look at the world from the eyes of a child, we'll see something different than if we look at it through their parents. Look at it different if we look at it from the side of an English or a French or a German or an American Black, a French Asian, or a Italian Greek or whatever. Recognizing that how you see the world reflects your positions. We look at this history of, in this country in particular, but also in England, how we define our history typically comes from the vantage point of the European. So we see the Native American through their eyes. We see the African through their eyes. We see the Asian or the Hispanic or whatever through the eyes of the European. As a consequence, those people are always viewed as reacting to the system, reacting to racism, reacting to colonialism, reacting to whatever. But what happens if we flip the script and look at it not from a reactionary perspective or looking at people like me as an object defined by someone else's, but as a subject with agency? And so rather than talking about how the slave responded to being a slave, how did America, for example, respond to the enslaved who rejected being called a slave, who rejected being a slave? And so therefore, through slave rebellions and insurrections and work stoppages and so forth and so on, actually served to transform this country. And they were not mere objects and reacting, but they took control of their situation and fought for their own freedom and their own identity.
Well, it's flipping the script is such a huge kind of pivot point to focus on as well. Like the focusing of the script of object turning to subject, taking power of the narrative or creating one's own narrative, deciding to do so. So that sounds like. To me, that sounds like a more equal way of, or closing in on a more equal, progressive way of running the world, of being in the world. Is it as simple as like white supremacists are seeing it in a certain way, and the way the world has always been, at least in their eyes, that these things are changing, and that's why they're exploding?
Our world is becoming more and more compact as between the internet and travel and so forth and so on. We are becoming more diverse. We're becoming more and more aware of these different narratives that are out there. And this challenges a way of thinking that has, for the last 400 years, controlled that narrative. Now, here we are in a situation where we're realizing that the majority of the world is not white. The majority of the world are people of color that are asserting their right not only to be, but to define their realities, themselves, their identities, and to take part in the construction of their histories. And that challenges the old way of thinking. What white supremacy means is that we control the narrative. So what happens when you challenge that control? Oh, by the way, one of the first things you do when you want to take control of a people is to take control of their history. In fact, you want to wipe that history off the slate and then define them totally based upon who you are and what you are and how you see them. Okay? And when you challenge that way of seeing, you challenge the very core of white supremacy.
During the transatlantic slave trade, European nations stole people from African nations, committed genocide on Native American peoples. Sexual abuse and violence were at unfathomable levels. Britain has often said that they had no slaves in their country, but they were actively trading in slavery across the world. How did European nations explain away this behavior? And also wondering, does that have a lasting effect, into today?
What is interesting is that if you look at the Declaration of Independence written by the founding persons of this country, one of the complaints that they raise is that because this king, England, has forced upon the Americas this cruel abuse of humans, slavery. Now, by the way, during this period of time, slavery had been outlawed in England. That's important, okay? Yet it allowed it to come into being in its English colonies, okay? All right. So it actually fostered that. Now, what's interesting is that the Americans took that out of the Declaration of Independence because it had obvious repercussions for themselves. But that's another issue. So England was able to avoid the conversation because they're saying it's not on English soil. Okay, it's over here. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing is that they actually phrased it in terms of, well, first of all, you had the papal bull of 1493, where the Pope of the Catholic Church, this is before the English got involved, said, look, first of all, the Native Americans were savages. They were heathens, as defined by the papal bull. It also declared all of the lands in the Americas available, free, no one occupied. Okay. And then it said that they could be claimed in the name of God and country. Okay. So the church has defined these people as non-people, stripped them of their sovereignty and of their humanity. All right. The same thing occurred when it comes to the Africans. They were stripped of their humanity by the church and state. Okay. These are not humans. In fact, there are those that argue that we're saving them from their heathen and brutish existence. We're doing them a favor. Okay. In fact, there was a wife of a president of the United States who I think was Mrs. Bush, who said, you know what? We took them out of the jungle. We gave them civilization. Not less than 2 years ago, the governor of Florida, DeSantis, said, because of us, the Africans have all of these skills, so forth and so on. We civilized them. We saved them. Well, there is a misunderstanding of the reality. Think about something. You would not traverse the continents going halfway around the world to go get a group of dumb, stupid, and lazy human beings. No, you would go there looking for specific skill sets.
Mm.
So the Africans that came, you would want one, the best humans that, in terms of physiques and stamina that you could find. I mean, given how many died in the passage, right? Those that survived had to have been the cream of the crop, literally. But what did they bring here? They brought individuals that were carpenters. They brought individuals that were builders. They brought individuals that knew about crops and rice planting, harvesting, so forth and so on. Okay, they brought individuals that had skill sets, right, that could help and enlarge their capacity to make money. All right. So what you have here is, if you ignore that reality, then you can argue, you know what? We saved them, these brutes and these heathens. To tell the truth means that, oh, these were not brutes and heathens. They were highly intelligent, sophisticated individuals who brought a skill set to this country and to the other countries where we brought them. Okay. That did what? That made it possible for us to make tons of money because of what they brought to this table.
Yeah, incredible. There's one fact. There's a million facts in your book that were blowing my mind, and one of them being that slaves built the White House. Like,
Yeah,
one, that's amazing. Two, why didn't I know that? Why is that not something that, like, I looked online, I went onto the White House
yeah,
website and it's there, but why is
right.
that not something that we all just know?
And by the way, at least 14 other major buildings just in the DC area that we're aware of, but also up until the end of slavery, all of the construction, all of the road work, much of the agriculture work and cooking and all of that were being done by the Africans. I mean, they were skilled craftsmen.
Mm.
Okay, all right. Again, so that means that we're looking at individuals that came here with skills and only enhanced those skills as they kept along. By the way, and we don't even talk about cooking. Okay, we won't talk about seamstresses. We won't talk about our even what we know about COVID, but also inoculations came out of Africans coming to this country with these medical skills. Okay, we can talk about women that came with the knowledge of birthing. Okay, midwives. Okay, that half of the births in the South and in this country at one time was being delivered by these Black women.
Incredible. The one other thing I wanted to ask about slavery as well. In your book, you talk about how slavery was not like, it wasn't like a new thing that these European nations had created, that other nations were also doing that, and it was practically worldwide. It's what it kind of seemed like from what I was reading. And I suppose, like, I was just wondering, when I think of slavery, I think of it as a European, like a shame on the European nations is what I always think of. That's how I connect it. And I'm just wondering, like, if it was already something that was going on before,
Mhm.
why is that the connection that I and so many other people have as well to that? Like, were the European nations, were they doing slavery differently than we'd seen before?
Well, first of all, let's go back before the Industrial Revolution, when throughout the world we have, as different human groups came into contact with each other, they would war over land, resources, so forth and so on. Okay. What's interesting is that in a war, you've got a choice. Am I going to kill all the enemy that I conquer? Or will I give them a choice to become my servant? Okay. You can die, you can become my servant. By the way, that's universal. That's in Africa, that's in Asia, Japan, China, throughout Europe, so forth and so on. Okay.
Mm.
Among the Jews, you see it in the Old Testament, you see it in the New Testament, you see it among Muslims, Hindu. You can't find a civilization that did not have some aspect of this because of as a consequence of war. Okay. What's interesting is that up until the European era of slavery, but slavery was not a permanent condition. That means that your children were not slaves because you were slaves. It was not generational. Okay. All right. They provided for, and in fact, in many civilizations, Greek and Roman civilization, slaves had higher social status than most other people. Okay, these were doctors and lawyers and skilled craftsmen, so forth and so on, highly esteemed in their particular in the countries where they're at. And by the way, they were called slaves, but they were servants. Okay, with and highly respected, cared for, had rights and privileges and all of that. Okay, what happens with the Europeans, different from any other form of slavery, and particularly here in the United States, is that they made servitude for life. By the way, nowhere in the U.S. Constitution will you see the word slave. You see the word servant because it was against international law at the time. All right, and we were aware of that, and so they were called servants. Okay,
so that was an example of an historical loophole.
Yeah. You're a servant. Okay. And by the way, the first group of forced laborers, servants in this country that the English brought were the Irish.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And the Irish were targeted because it goes all the way back to King Henry VIII, who wanted his 8th or 9th divorce. And the Pope said it's not going to happen. All right. And the king said, tell you what, to the Archbishop of Canterbury, either I'm going to get a divorce or I'm going to start chopping off the heads of priests until I get me my divorce. Okay. By the way, that's how the Church of England came into being, but that's a side story. The Irish were targeted because that was the first colony that the English got. Before they came to Americas, they started with the Irish. Okay. Because they had this whole vindictiveness targeting them because they were Catholic. Okay. All right. And that they occupied the country because of this. This goes all the way back. So the first group of forced laborers that the English imposed in the Americas were the Irish. Now, before the English, there were the French and the Dutch and the Portuguese and the Spanish who had slaves who had brought Africans into this country. Okay. Why did it change? Why did the English colonies change this? It had to do with the shortage of labor and the availability of the African as servants. Now, what's interesting is that the French colonies and the Spanish colonies got to the point where either they got rid of their colonies or they got rid of slavery. Okay. All right. Why did they get rid of slavery? The French and their colonies quite easily. Because the Africans rebelled in Haiti. Okay. You might ask yourself, why did they rebel? Who are these Africans? They happen to have been trained military personnel, both men and women, that the French had brought to the Americas. Why would they bring trained military personnel? We hire mercenaries all the time. They were hired to control the Africans. Okay? And they wind up saying, oh, we're not free. And so they rebelled, and you had a rebellion. But anyway, so what's happening, and that's how France got out of the Americas. They sold off all of their properties. We wind up getting the largest tract of land the Louisiana Purchase as a consequence of that. Within this country, they passed the law that made servitude for life. They were servants for life. Not only were they servants for life, but their children would follow the womb, is what it said.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
all
heinous.
right. Yes. Follow the womb. So if your mother is a slave, you're going to be a slave. By the way, they did this purposefully, one, because it's kind of hard even today to guarantee paternity, but we do know maternity. Okay. We do know who the mother is. Okay. But it was something even more insidious than that. The slave owners realized that, oh, I can increase my property by forcing sex upon these women, not only with other slaves, but I myself will rape these women and produce children. And consequently, you've got George Washington and several other of our political leaders who had slave children from their slaves. Okay. All right. But what this also did was this means that, oh, now this institution becomes generational. Never existed before. Okay. It also becomes racial. Okay. Anybody that you conquered or in combat, so forth and so on, could come into and become a servant. Okay. Only the Africans were the ones that we put into this. And by the way, why? The Catholic Church had no presence on the African continent, nor did they have any access to any of the other major political or religious entities. All right, and Africa was then and now fragmented. It wasn't like China, was not like any of the other large national groups. Okay, all right, and they were far enough removed from Europe that they could not invade or retaliate. But there's a bigger thing than that. The Africans, the Europeans did not go into Africa and force slaves upon them. They went there and purchased slaves, just like anybody who's on the market system. Okay. All right. These were combat properties that had been won in combat. What the Europeans might have done is what we do today is give weapons to one group and encourage them to fight against this other group, and then to conquer them, and then we will give them other weapons in trade of their slaves. All right, and so you get this reciprocal process. But again, they had no clue what was happening on this side of the equator. So slavery becomes racialized. It also becomes generational. But why the African? This is an interesting point. Europeans found that, one, they could not supply enough labor, but also much of the labor that indentured servants or forced servants that they brought here, particularly in the South, were dying off. They were dying because of this virus going around, okay? Because of malaria. They discovered that the African was immune to malaria. Many of them, they had something called sickle cell anemia, which is a biological adaptation of these people coming from this hot, humid, mosquito-infested terrain. They developed immunity to it. So that meant that, one, they're used to the climate. Two, they had skills that were necessary to produce a crop and harvest. And three, they weren't dying. And all of this meant that, oh, wow, they made the perfect slave from that vantage point. Okay, and they had no allies that could challenge the European authority, nor did they have the knowledge of what was happening. All of these things took place, and that's how we get this difference, and that's how slavery became racialized, and race became embedded along with the Papal Decree of 1493. Add this, now we've encoded race within at the beginning of our country.
Wow. Thank you, Rodney. With that answer, it's reminding me as well how kind of historically long your book is as well. Like there's so much history in it. I was learning so much history wise from that book. And written so brilliantly, of course. I want to ask about Haiti as well. You touched on it a bit, and I want to ask some more about it. Before 1960, you say that Haiti and the Dominican Republic, two nations, they're on the same island. They were very similar in GDP.
Yeah.
Nowadays, the Dominican Republic's GDP is 800% higher than that of Haiti.
Yeah.
Which sounds insane. You say that Haiti went from being considered a prized jewel of the Americas to becoming one of the poorest countries in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go into a bit more of what to explain what happened there, please?
Yeah. Well, one, you've got the Haitian Rebellion, all right, and the U.S. backed France after that and forced Haiti to pay reparations, okay, to France to the tune of several billion francs. Okay. 3, the U.S. actually occupied Haiti on 3, if not 4, separate occasions and instituted puppet regimes. Everything from we're afraid of communism, the spread of communism, to corruption, so forth and so on. Okay. At the same time, Haiti was on one side of the island. Then you got Dominican Republic on the other. You got one that was controlled by the French and the other one controlled by the Spanish. Okay. One who are racialized as black and the other one who is racialized as white. Dominican Republicans consider themselves white. Okay. We declared and gave most favored nation status to the Dominican Republic. If you look at the World Bank has made major investment and business loans to the Dominican Republic. The best thing we've done to Haiti is provide aid. Okay, aid. No country has ever gotten out of poverty, just like no person has ever gotten out of poverty as a consequence with aid. They do get out of poverty through economic development, economic intervention, where you become a market economy. Okay. We facilitated Dominican Republicans becoming a market economy, and we accelerated tourism, and we accelerated their access to the United States as citizens, so forth and so on. At the same time, we blocked all 3 of those access to the Haitians. Okay. All right.
And sorry, Rodney, this is so the Haitian Revolution is when the people living in Haiti, the Haitians, they come in, they're taken in, as slaves for France. They eventually rebel against France. They take over their own nation, the one they happen to be living in and working in and having their lives in and stuff. And then you're saying that the reparations to France are Haiti has taken away taken away people that they took there and for like
no. Reparations is where the Haitians were forced to pay France for the loss of their resources in Haiti. You love
mental.
that, right? They lost their slaves, they lost their plantations, they lost their colony. Okay.
Right. Boo-hoo.
And so France demanded that the Haitians pay them for a successful rebellion. And we backed France in terms of that.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, we took from that a page in the United States as well. Guess who got reparations from the Civil War?
Oh, no.
The farmer Confederates, no slaves, okay, for the loss of their property and such as slaves and loss of income, so forth and so on. Okay. Wow. All right. And
that's that's another, you were saying earlier about like dehumanizing people, othering them, and like that's a way of doing that, right? It's like, hey, you people,
we're not going to repair the damage.
Yeah,
we're going to force you. How crazy is that? It's like I rape somebody and then I force them to pay me for the pain and suffering that I went through in the process of raping them. That's what we force. We join with the French and enforce that upon the Haitians. Okay. All right. Several trillions of dollars in reparation. Okay. Along with disinvestment in Haiti. Okay. While at the same time investing in encouraging tourism, which is a major source of resources for the Dominican Republic, while at the same time discouraging the same. And look at immigration, okay? We have an open door to the Dominican Republic, and we require the Haitians to slip in the back door if they're lucky, okay? All right. Again, we've racialized this. And by the way, why would someone come here? Look at remittances. Okay. Look at the billions of dollars that leave this country that go back to, yes, Haiti gets a lot, but Dominican Republic gets a heck of a lot more. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then you look at the World Bank intervention in Dominican Republic and the lack thereof in terms of Haiti. And so what we see is the jewel, literally, the jewel of the Caribbean become the pit, okay, where this other country is elevated up on several levels up, 800% increase of the GDP in the last few years.
You talk about the Great Migration in the US as well in your
Yes.
book. Black people moving from inhospitable southern US states where there's violence, sexual abuse, and lynchings were common, and they're migrating to the northern states. However, it wasn't so perfect up north either, with different systems of racism causing new injustices. Your own grandfather, you say, moved from rural Mississippi to East St. Louis.
Yes.
What new racist systems of injustice met people like your grandfather?
What's interesting, my grandfather, again, lynching did not start in the South until after the Civil War, which is quite interesting. Okay. And who was targeted for lynching? Poor? No. Stupid? No. Lazy? No. Criminal? No. Black? No. Successful?
Mm.
Entrepreneurial? Okay. Individuals. This was intended to intimidate. Okay. All right. This was intended to intimidate. Whole black towns were burned. Blacks at the end of the Civil War took money that they had gotten, okay, from working in Reconstruction, and bought the soldiers, okay, and built all black towns. Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rosewood in Florida, for example, okay, Cincinnati here, okay, several race riots got totally destroyed. My grandfather left Mississippi because of lynching. Okay. He comes up to a industrially very rich area right outside of St. Louis in a place called East St. Louis, Illinois. At the time when there is a strike taking place in one of the major meat packing corporations in the area. In fact, this area was the center of meat packing in the country at that time. Okay. Well, guess what? The predominantly white labor force that was in the midst of unionizing turn of the century, they went on strike. Okay. And Armor Packing Company, which is the company that one of the ones that went on strike, I don't think they're in existence now. They sent trains to the South to encourage blacks. They brought up train loads of workers, black men, to take these jobs. Imagine, if you will, these whites on strike, and they see a group of blacks getting off from trains, getting ready to go in and go to work to take their jobs. How did they respond? They responded with violence. How did the blacks respond to this violence? With violence. And you get what is known as the East St. Louis race riots. Okay. Now, after that, an uneasy truce developed between the whites and the blacks. So whites lived on one side of town, literally a line drawn down the middle of the city, and blacks lived on the other side of town. As long as blacks stayed on their side of the town in their exclusive black schools, exclusive black stores, exclusive black whatever, they were okay. But if they stepped across the line, then they would be targeted by police or other kinds of hostilities. Okay, all right. I never came into contact with a white teacher until I went to college. Wow. Okay. All right. All of my teachers were black, and which meant that I grew up in the 60s, or at least I came of age in the 60s. And I had black teachers who with masters and PhDs teaching in high school and middle school and even grade school because they can't teach at the college level. Okay. What's interesting is that after the civil rights movement, many of my former teachers got jobs teaching at colleges and universities throughout the country, much less the region. So I got the equivalency of an honors, if not a college degree in high school, okay, because of the commitment to teaching, but also the qualifications of those black scholars that were my teachers.
I wanted to go back. You mentioned a bit earlier about Florida last year in 2023. I just wanted to ask a bit more about that. In your book, you give an example from Florida's education system. As recent as 2023, fifth graders were being taught that Africans taken to the US during slavery developed skills which, in some cases, could be applied for their benefit, as you were saying earlier. It's such shocking language, and it also ignores the fact that Africans brought skills with them and benefits
Yeah,
their enslaved nations. And we were talking earlier about the White House. My mind was kind of blowing a bit of just like this was happening last like you. It seems crazy. This was
year
happening
ago.
last year. This kind of stuff. Like, what's behind the attack on education with regards to critical race theory, and what are their goals here?
They're quite simple. One, if you control the narrative, you control the reality. Okay. The most radical, revolutionary thing you can do is to educate somebody. Okay.
Hmm.
The most radical, revolutionary thing you can do is to empower somebody with knowledge of who they are and their contributions. The one way to keep someone down is to help them or make them think that you've never done anything. Okay. You're totally reliant upon me. I created you. I control you. And I've always done that. If you talk to many young people, they'll say, well, it's always been that way. It's always racism, it's always sexism, homophobia, it's always been that way. But if you can point to, no, it has not always been that way. In fact, here's the explicit point in historical time where this came into being. And oh, by the way, the individuals were not slaves, they were enslaved. There's a subtle difference between those two. A
Mm.
slave is one who has no subjective reality except an enslaved person is one that you're trying to make into a slave. An enslaved person rebels, rejects servitude and slavery. So if you help an individual to realize, you know what? You were not a slave, you were enslaved. Not only were you not a slave, but you effected change. You always had agency. Oh, you were not dumb and stupid and lazy. By the way, if you were dumb and stupid and lazy, that would suggest possibly a genetic link, a deficiency on your part. But if you were among some of the strongest and brightest that literally the world had to offer, that you brought a set of skills that helped transform this country, build this country, all right, then by the way, that means that, oh, if that's what I descend from, then what's stopping me now from being top of the class? Oh, I'm not an object, I'm a subject. I'm not a reactor. I have agency. I make choices. Okay. Really? If I want to hold you down, I convince you that you don't have any choices. And it's always been that way. Okay. If I want you to empower you, then I teach you of who you are and why you are. Many young people are confused today. They're angry, they're bitter because they don't see the beauty of who they have been and who they could be. Okay. All right. You know what? The you push somebody into a corner and you tell them that they're just an animal or slightly above an animal, and you keep pushing and pushing them, what is their response except for violence? But if I inform you that, you know what, you come out of genius, you come out of skills, you come out of really, and you can be like your ancestors, you can be like your mom and dad, okay? You have choice. That's what it's all about. And if I can strip you of those choices, I tell you, your choice don't mean a damn thing. Okay. You have no history but the history that I am going to give you. Okay. You have no reality but the reality that I am going to define for you. That produces the bitterness, that produces the anger, that produces the black on black crime, for God's sake. Okay. Why? Because individuals are being taught to hate themselves and not to love themselves.
Well, thanks, Rodney. I mean, through hearing you talk today, but also through reading the book, it's just such an essential tool that we have here, critical race theory. It's such a hugely important tool. Wow, to open people up to themselves. The stopping that from happening, the stopping from educating on critical race theory, who is that benefiting?
Oh, here's the interesting thing. It costs the United States $16 trillion a year to maintain racial structures. According to US Bank, recent report just came out.
Wow.
Okay. So who benefits? It benefits a small group of individuals who want to preserve their power. By the way, I argue that white privilege does not exist. Okay.
Can you explain that one?
Yeah. White privilege, the idea that all whites share in racism and have privileges because they're white. Okay. I argue that that is wrong. What existed and has existed is a small group of whites, white males with property. Okay. So you have an elite group of white males who have been maintained their collective control over the system, the structure, so forth and so on, who benefit from racism at the expense of the majority of whites, blacks, Asians, Hispanics, so forth and so on. And when they are challenged, guess what they do? They convince poor whites that they have privilege. Okay? Let me give you an
You're
example.
just like me kind of thing. That kind of the rich whites are saying to the poor whites, you're just like me.
These colored people are taking your jobs away from you. Yes, they are challenging you. They are a threat to your future. We need to put them back in their place. Oh, the first time this argument was used was when the Irish that were servants rebelled with the Africans that were servants in Virginia in what has been come known as Bacon's Rebellion. Okay, where they shut down Virginia. How did the white planter elite deal with that rebellion? They convinced the Irish that they were white.
Right.
They weren't white before that. Okay, and then they elevated them just a little bit. They made them overseers. They made them the police officers, so forth and so on. Okay, just a bit above the African. Here we are today in the midst of a political moment where there are those that are arguing that people of color, the brown people, immigrants, flooding the border, and blacks and others are threatening this society, tainting the blood. By the way, the last time we've used the word tainting the blood was Hitler when he talked about the Jews and others in Europe, in Germany, tainting the blood. Okay, and we have to purify the blood. Okay, and by the way, this goes in terms of what now we argue white replacement theory, that there's a fear that these people are going to replace whites. Okay, it's a myth. What's happening is we're beginning to discover that the world does not revolve around America or the Europeans. That the world is a much broader expanse of people, and the majority of those people are people of color. The problem is that the United States of America is becoming more and more diverse. And in fact, in the next 20 to 30 years, we're going to be, for the first time in our history, majority persons of color. Okay, that's going to be the majority in this country. That poses a threat to those that have manipulated race all these years. So how do I deal with that? I organize as many whites as I can and say, you're under threat. These colored people, these brown people coming in from Mexico, and these black people that are killing each other and all this violence and everything, okay? They're going to rape your women. They're going to steal your children. They're going to take your jobs, okay? And we need to get tough on crime. We need to get tough on the border. We need to get tough to bring America back again. And that is this existential moment that we're in now. And how do we do that? One, we got to demonize these people coming across the border, and then we've got to strip subjective realities and agency away from those people that have been across these borders in this America called Black people.
I want to come to towards the end of your book, you talk about a lot of contemporary examples as well. I love all the pop culture examples that you use to explain all this theory. It was so helpful for me. You tell us about the Black women unsung heroes, the bedrock of children's futures. You also talk about the fetishization of Black women and the trope of the angry Black woman. An example that jumped out at me was the way that you say that Serena Williams was treated for acting out her anger during tennis matches versus her white and male counterparts.
Right.
Can you explain what happened in this example, and also how dangerous is the angry Black woman trope in society?
Well, first of all, here is Serena Williams. She gets chastised and punished by the referee because she hits her racket on the ground. The same thing happened about 3-4 weeks later by a white male player, and no one said anything. Okay, here's the thing. Oh, just recently, just this past weekend, you had a Black football player late for work, okay, in Florida. Police stop him. Next thing you know, he's on the ground. He's been punched a couple of times. Okay. Whoa. This is a NFL football player. Okay. They subsequently let him go. He wound up getting there. Oh, by the way, they wound up winning the game. He wound up scoring a touchdown, so forth and so on. Wow. They joked with him with his hands behind his back. Okay. By the way, the idea that these people cannot get angry, one, okay, that they must stay totally obedient and submissive. That therein is one problem. Okay. The full range of emotions that humans have, we hold these truths to be self-evident. That I can get ticked off. She can get ticked off. Okay. One Black civil rights made me wound up saying, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Okay. Aretha Franklin sang a song, all I want is RESPECT. Okay. But past that, we chastise individuals, we penalize individuals because they step out of the good mammy role or the uncle Ben role. Okay. The comforting, quiet, strong Black woman that never gets angry, never gets emotional, so forth and so on.
1 second, Rodney. Uncle Ben, in this case, you were using that as the example of the person depicted on the rice all those years, no? On the
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's the male stereotype version that's similar to the mammy stereotype. Okay. On the other side, who the mammy who takes care of our children, who breastfeeds, so forth and so on, and never gets angry. Okay. All right. The angry Black woman called the Sapphire. Okay. She is ridiculed and punished for being a strong Black woman who will tell you exactly what she feels. Okay. All right. That again, my mother was a strong Black woman, and she would let you know when she was upset with you. Okay. All right. To curtail that and to one, stigmatize those individuals that fall into this characterization, right, does just as much damage as all the other stereotypes. Because one, it denies a woman, a Black woman in this case, of the full range of human emotions. Okay, not one, not two, but the full range. Okay, all right, not stereotypically falling into this category versus this category versus this category, but again, the full range of human emotions. Okay, not gendered, not sexualized, not objectified, but how you feel at that time. That's an aspect of freedom, sir. Okay, who gets to tell me how I feel? Okay, all right, who has that right? And this is what I'm challenging in that section. No one has that right. And besides, we're taking a sliver of one's personality, what might have happened at this one moment with this one person, and using this to define you in totality. No, sir. You are at that moment, you're angry. Okay. But guess what? I see you with that kid and you're loving. I see you with your husband and you may be stern. Okay. I see you running for president of the United States, and I see that you're intelligent, okay, and aggressive and eager to serve the people. And by the way, even as we speak, there are those that would want to characterize her into this, talking about Kamala Harris, and put her into some type of stereotypical race gender bags. And she defies all of those definitions by saying, you know what? I'm not limited to your small, minor stereotypical roles. I'm a full-fledged human being. Okay. And that's what it's all about.
Towards the end of your book, you acknowledge that Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous "I Have a Dream" speech still
Right.
fosters hope. But you wonder whether we need new dreams, new
Yes.
dreamers even.
Yes.
What are these dreams and how can they translate to systemic change?
Here's the interesting thing. The young people today, we need to listen to them and their dreams. Okay. Our job as older people within society, the scriptures say that you're young will dream dreams. Okay. And you're old will prophesy. Our job, by the way, is to help the young people not only to dream, but empower them to make those dreams a reality. Okay. What are those dreams? I don't know. Okay. It is for our current young children that are just now infants. Okay. To be empowered through the best education and access to resources that we as the wealthiest country in the world, there's no reason why our children aren't all of our children aren't the best educated that literally America could buy. Okay. All right. Only when that happens can we look and see, oh, wow, look at what they're doing. Okay. Look at what they're doing. Okay. I mean, we thought AI was something. They got AI standing on his head. That's old history. Okay. That's ancient history. Okay. All right. What we need to be able to guarantee is that all humans endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Those three, by the way, translate into the capacity to dream and the power to realize those dreams. And then the joy that comes from living out those dreams.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Rodney. Thanks so much for talking about. I've absolutely loved digging into your book with you today. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time. And I'm going to let everyone know where to find your book in a moment. I just wanted to ask first, is there anywhere we can find you online?
You know what? I tell people that I am the most public person that you'll ever come across. You see my name right there?
Uh-huh.
Do a Google search. Okay. I'm at Miami University of Ohio. Okay. But I'm also on all kinds of other locations and places. Look me up. Send me an email. I'd love to. I respond to all of them within 3 or 4 weeks. Okay. All right. But also, wherever you are, whoever you are, I want you to dream. I want you to have others to dream and to live out those dreams.
Beautiful. Thank you, Rodney. Critical Race Theory and the Search for Truth by Rodney D. Coates is published by Bristol University Press. You can find out more about the book by going to bristoluniversitypress.co.uk and also transformingsociety.co.uk.